Welcome to the Ask Sensei Tony podcast, where Sensei will address your questions about life from a cosmic perspective. Please subscribe and ask a question at AskSenseiTony.com to find out more about studying with Sensei privately, becoming a part of our spiritual community, and training to become a mindful minister of oneness in our seminary. We hope you enjoy this episode and find it helpful.
Hi everyone, this is Sensei Tony, and today's question comes from Perry. Perry says, what can I do when people make incorrect assumptions about my political and religious beliefs and begin a conversation with me assuming that I will agree with what they're saying? Thanks, Perry. It's a good question. You know, conversation is an interesting subject to kind of take apart. I would say that when we engage in conversation with someone, it's probably always helpful to have some sort of intention that's sort of directing the approach that we are going to take. And if we go into a conversation without an intention, then it's easy to get lost somewhere along the way. And by say intention, it doesn't mean you have to have like this carefully constructed or crafted approach to what you'll do, but rather just that you have at least a thought about what you want to accomplish from this conversation. Now, even if you have set out an intention for this, that doesn't mean you can always anticipate what the conversation will be about. And in fact, I would say that part of deep listening is kind of putting aside what you think the other person's going to say and really take time to just sort of be present and listen. And I think of listening, at least really deep listening, I think of it as a form of meditation, because you're allowing the person to share thoughts and feelings. And there's a non-judgmental awareness. And that takes cultivation, because in our ordinary discourse, we pretty much, someone says something and we're kind of like, okay, now I'm going to respond with what I'm saying. And sometimes it's not a response as much as it is a reaction to something that someone has said. And so it takes practice. And I always say you should practice with people that you're friendly with and love and care about you, or that you have more of an intimacy with, and then you can practice with like neutral people you might see on the street or in the train or wherever, and then once you've kind of honed your skills, then you can kind of take on more difficult characters. That's not always possible. Sometimes you got to plunge in. But ideally, that gives you a good practice ground to work from. So you start by deep listening, and you kind of enter into that process with what we call in Buddhism not knowing, where I'm going to kind of put aside my preconceptions and ideas just for a moment, and I'm going to just listen. And just listen, without trying to think of something clever to say back, or feeling like I have to say something back. It's interesting. I suggest you try it as an experiment and see how it goes. And as you get more comfortable with it, then you can certainly go further with that. So once you've listened, then the second step in Buddhism, and this is a form of Buddhist practice that was created by at least the naming of it this way was created by my Zen teacher, Bernie Glassman. However, the ideas behind it go back into ancient Buddhism. But he would say to bear witness, which is to become one with what is happening. So the next step would be, in listening, to try to become one with what the person is saying. And the way I interpret that is similar to what, for for some of you that have studied the four direction system of mindfulness, you know we have this technique called the psychological disarm. And I call it psychic jiu-jitsu. And basically, you want to find something in what the person's saying that you can agree with. You know, even if it's just a momentary agreement, or if it's more like something where it is a agreement that you can make temporarily, or maybe it's only something you make, you know, you only maybe agree with 1% out of 99, but you find something that you can agree with. To me, that's a really successful way to sort of bear witness or sort of connect with someone. And then from there, the idea is that the right action, the right connecting action will kind of flow. So going back to Perry's question, if I enter into a conversation with somebody, and this I think happens to everybody, and there's assumptions being made on their part, and believe you me, when you're in my role as a Buddhist teacher, as an ordained minister, there's a lot of projection that goes on and a lot of preconceptions. So people often make assumptions. So when someone does something like that and they start to say those sort of things, I have a choice. I can engage in the situation, or I don't have to. I can just listen to what they have to say and say, oh, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, and move on to something else. If the person really wants to kind of dig into it and is kind of looking for a reaction from you that kind of acknowledges, hey, we both believe the same thing here, then I would take on some certain rules of engagement. So here are my rules of engagement. If I'm there someone has come to me and they're seeking help, I'm going to be very direct in trying to disarm them and then redirect them to something that's more helpful and healing. If I'm not in that role, then I can sort of be more passive and just sort of listen to what the person has to say, and once they've said their piece, then I can move on, or and decide to engage or not. There was my father. He was a very outspoken individual. One time he had a horse ranch, and I got him a wooden placard, which I still have, and actually it's in the back seat of my Wrangler. It says, "Speak your mind, just ride a fast horse." Always good to keep in mind if you're the person sharing, because you don't know how people are going to respond. And I think that that's a big part of mindfulness, is realizing that just as humans are terrible prognosticators, we're pretty bad at reading minds too. And I know some people think they're really good at it, but you know, from a factual point of view, the evidence doesn't support that. So I never imagine that I'm reading somebody's mind or no. I like to be I like to empty myself and just be like a mirror, you know, and let that be the way that whatever they're putting out there, I try to be a mirror for them. So my way of engaging is to use something like the psychological disarm, psychic jiu-jitsu, which is incredibly effective. Or I might, if I'm in a role where I'm, being asked questions in my capacity as a teacher, I have a tendency to kind of be a little bit more of a agent provocateur, where what I mean by that is, like, if somebody, like, let's take religion, and somebody comes on really strong and says, hey, I believe in God, I might take on a provocative approach and come from a place where I don't believe in God. Or if the person doesn't believe in God, I could be provocative by then coming from the approach of someone who does believe in God. And that creates an interesting kind of discourse. And you can do the same with politics. If somebody comes on strong and thinks that you share a particular political view, you could always be a provocateur and take the opposite view. But you have to be careful when you're doing that. I only will do that in certain settings. So like if I'm in a setting where people are kind of coming to me as a teacher, then I might be provocative because you've already agreed that you want to get something from me that may be helpful to you. And so that might be a clever way of going about it. But, a lot of times when people are sharing a very strong point of view, they have their own doubts in the back of their mind about, what exactly that means. And so they may be saying it because they're having secret doubts about their position. So if they get you to buy into what they're saying, then that kind of alleviates that doubt that they may have had in the back of their mind. And I think that's what drives a lot of it. So, in summary, Perry, if someone starts to talk to you making an assumption about a religious or political view that you really don't share, then you have the right to just listen, compassionately just being, and in a very compassionate presence where you're just practicing not knowing, and that's it. Then you can also do the disarm, where you're going to bear witness to what they're saying, find something that you can agree with in what they're saying. And then when you do the disarm, and I guess I should just briefly give you that, although all of it's in my book, Free Your Mind, the 4-direction system of mindfulness. But essentially, it's 4 steps. The first step is when someone does something like that, you have to acknowledge what's going on inside of you. Because if you don't acknowledge what's happening inside of you, then you're going to have a tendency to play out of a particular persona, which may not be very genuine. It could be a defensive persona. It could be kind of a glad-handing type of persona where you're just trying to make everybody like you. So, you have to acknowledge what's happening. And you can do this while you're listening. It only takes a few moments. And I have this thing I call the wave breath, where you start visualize up here that just like either warm or cool water just kind of rolling down over you as you breathe out, and it goes out through your feet. And you might do that once or twice. And again, you can do that whole sort of thing while you're listening. And you acknowledge what you're feeling. And then the second step is to decide what your rules of engagement are going to be. Like, what are you going to do at this stage? What action are you going to take? Are you just going to listen? Are you going to, you're going to try to find something to agree with in what they're saying? Are you going to be provocative? And I love the disarm, because I think the disarm gets us into conversations that are much more productive. I love debate. I've always been a part of debate. I've led debate teams, and I enjoy arguing. But when I'm doing an argument with someone, I'm coming at it from a place of compassion. So I'm not trying to destroy someone. I'm not trying to hurt someone. I'm really just enjoying the argument. I can really have great arguments, like with my son, my adult son, Eben, who is brilliant, and I can have those kind of conversations with him, and I can also have them with some of my nephews, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy arguing. And when I'm around other people that I think both have the intellectual capacity for that kind of argument and at the same time have the right intention, there's nothing for me that's more enjoyable. So in the second step, most often I'm going to choose to disarm the person. So I'm going to find something I can say that agrees with them in some fashion. And then how you know you've disarmed someone is because they won't know what to say. I mean, they will literally sometimes you'll stop them in their tracks, mouth aghast, and they're kind of like, their brain kind of stops. And that's one of the cool things about the redirection. Step 2 is that the step 2 where you're doing the disarm is that the brain doesn't know how to handle it because it's all prepared for kind of anticipating a fight of some sort. And when you agree with someone, the reason I call it Sangha Jiu-Jitsu is because the idea of Jiu-Jitsu was originally that it means gentle way, so gentle technique. So it was the idea that you were going to use the weight of someone against them, or you're going to use their strike against them. You weren't going to meet their yang with yang. You're going to meet their yang with yin. And when you do meet their yang with yin, then once they're off balance, then you can redirect them. So that's how you know you've done the disarm, because people, they don't know what to say. And there's something really cool I discovered after years of doing this in a lot of tense situations. And that is, if you don't say anything, then often the person will start to come up with something that is mediating. In other words, they might start to come up with something that actually is kind of coming back around to where you're at. And their attack or whatever will suddenly soften. It's an interesting process, and I think it's just the way the brain is. I think whenever the person is disarmed, it's because they're confused, because they're expecting a certain type of reaction. And when you take yourself out of the equation, you step aside, the blow. They lose their balance. It puts them off balance. And then if you let that go for a little bit, they're going to try to find their balance again, right? So I'm using that analogy in martial arts. So if they're off balance, they're going to try to find balance again, right? And in trying to find balance again, they're going to have to probably have a much more even approach to what they're thinking and saying. So it's pretty miraculous how sometimes people will come right around to a solution that works for both of you, or an approach that you both will be in agreement with. So the redirect is when you then decide whether you're going to be able to sort of take it to a place where you want to go with it. And that's why intention is really important, as I said at the very beginning of this talk. Because if your intention isn't sincere, then you're going to fall into some persona. You're going to be the nice guy, or you're going to be the bastard, whatever. But you're going to go into one of those defense mechanisms. Whereas you're clear about your intention, that intention will carry all the way through. So when I redirect, I usually will try to touch the hurt part of that person. In other words, there's a hurting part of them that is represented by whatever their attack or whatever it is they're saying. And I want to help heal that. So what I will do is I'll reach out to that aspect. And again, you do that by connecting with where the person's suffering. Because if you know the model that we use to talk about the different ways that the ego expresses itself from the Four Directions system of mindfulness, we talk about, the archaic or original conditioning voice, the reactive voice, and the mediating clear voice. And if you are able to help disarm somebody and their defense mechanisms, which is surrounding their reactive aspect of their ego, then they will be open to wisdom. And so that's when you can redirect things. You keep kind of bowling them over with compassionate action, and then there'll be an opening to where you can then maybe offer some wisdom that will be helpful to them. But the truth is, if you haven't been able to disarm the ego that way, then whatever you say, and even if it's true, the person probably isn't going to hear. And part of the defense mechanism system is to, I call it the twin horns of defense that it uses, and that is cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias. So where cognitive dissonance means that no matter what you're saying, they're going to kind of not want to see it, not want to hear it. Kind of like the old I always think of the Planet of the Apes, the original, over the eyes, over the mouth, you know. No, see, I don't, or I think of, what was that old TV series, where they were prisoners of war in a Nazi concentration camp of sorts, Hogan's Heroes, and the one character, Stultz, would always say, I see nothing, I hear nothing. So when you're really getting into this, you realize that cognitive dissonance is going to be there, and confirmation bias, so where they're going to basically use anything they have to support their point of view. They're going to only look at the data that supports their point of view, and they're loath to look at the other view. So that's why the disarm is so important. But you redirect and you touch that hurt part of them gently, and you help them to kind of be more open, you know, to hearing whatever, you know, reasonable wisdom you may have to offer. And the fourth step is essentially, you know, when you've done that disarm, is to, you know, basically, I always say you should reaffirm to yourself, you know, you should always reaffirm to yourself in some sense that I understand how the mind works, I understand how to do this, and that kind of reinforces the learning. And it also kind of gets you to check in, and this is something you can do too as part of a fourth step, if you will, is to sort of ask yourself after the intercourse has occurred, the verbal intercourse, then you can say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how'd that go? And that way you're bringing the left brain in. And so, you know, if you're scoring 8s and 9s, believe me, then that's the process that your mind is going to turn to in conflict. This is, again, I guess why I use a lot of analogies to martial arts, because the more you train yourself to deal with an attack, to receive an attack, which in Japanese martial arts is sometimes called randori, the more you do that, the more comfortable you get with it, the more your whole body learns to respond in a different way. So there you go, Perry. I hope that was helpful. Now, I do think there was a second part there, and forgive me, I think nope, I think that was it. So I think we've kind of got that one down. So I hope you found that helpful. Please contact me if you'd like to go further. Thank you.
You've been listening to Ask Sensei Tony. Please visit our website at AskSenseiTony.com, check out Sensei's books and videos, and become a part of the Dragonfly spiritual lifestyle.